Deleted Session, 1979. November 12th. Now, the man who wrote Alice in Wonderland was, I believe, a mathematician of note in his time. He considered himself to be excellent at his work. It gave him a professional respectability, a feeling of worth and merit. He found it, his occupation, to be a responsible one, befitting an adult. The occupation filled many of his needs and expressed some of his abilities. In his spare time, however, for a lark, simply because he wanted to, he wrote his Alice in Wonderland, a book that is a masterpiece at many levels. What a shock when he discovered that the world was ignoring what he thought to be his important contribution to mathematics. He believed that he should devote all of his time to his work, and could hardly forgive himself for his regrettable lapses into writing. And he was writing, after all, not even for adults, and not for young males either. He was, in a fashion, only sexually ambiguous, his mathematics expressing what he thought of as an acceptable male aspect, while the artistic levels in his mind now. He related to his feminine aspects, so he was to some extent a divided man. His creativity showed itself, however, when he allowed himself to play, when he forgot what he thought he should do, and did what he wanted to do. Because of his beliefs, he considered himself somewhat of a failure, and the rich, evocative nature of his own stories did not meet with the approval of his academically attuned mind. Despite himself, however, he was stretching the dimensions of his own consciousness, exercising his consciousness in different directions, expanding the scope of his abilities, and in so doing, contributing a small masterpiece to the world. I want here to stress the basic playful exercising aspects of creativity. When a child indulges in physical play, it exercises its muscles and its entire body. No one has to tell a child to play, for playing comes naturally. Playful games in childhood, not dictated by teachers or parents, often give clear indications of a child's abilities and leanings. You can sense by watching a child play the future shape that his or her life can most productively take. The child does not consciously exercise his or her legs so that they will be strong, but simply joyfully follows the inner impulse to do so. All children exercise, though relatively few end up, say, as specialists in sports. So the end result of such physical play is the future development of a healthy, strong body. The end result, then, is not a product, but a more completed kind of being. Now, creativity is basically a mental proposition, a mental or psychic activity. It is also, like physical exercise, an energizing phenomenon, one that expands and extends the mental and the psychic properties, as surely as physical exercise develops the body's being. What you are dealing with, then, in creativity is a continuing kind of psychic play, an activity that probes into the nature of inner reality and explores it with as much sheer vitality as that with which the child explores physical reality. The child runs, falls down, skips, spins, climbs, swings, tries out its body in as many ways as possible, and naturally explores the body's relationship with its environment. Then the child explores the environment itself. Besides this, the child, almost from its first moment of clear awareness, begins to play with its own consciousness. And in the same fashion, what can its thoughts do? Where can its thoughts go? Where do its thoughts go? How long can it hold a thought? And later, can a thought be held mentally as an object can be physically? Long before a child learns to place one play black on top of another, it has already learned to mentally stack one thought upon another, so to speak. It learns that in a fashion sounds are stuck inside the mind before, say, words are spoken. That kind of mental and psychic expansion in one way or another constantly occurs. In conventional art, you end up with a product on many such occasions, a book or painting or whatever, as you attempt to define in physical terms the reality of an inner existence with which you have always been familiar, and to leave in physical reality some evidence, however slight, of inner visions that flicker with all consciousness. The creative product is a remnant, then a glowing fragment of a larger saint whole. As a child, with no preconceived ideas in normal terms, you drew and wrote stories. Ruber wrote stories of points and drew. The natural impulses were allowed their free play. Later, you believed that artists should be artists. The concentration in painting should be so intense, that there would be no thought of any other occupation. The concerns of the world, its progress or lack of it, the nature of existence, none of those issues would interfere with such an artistic vision. As in the case of seasoning, masterpieces would justify all else. Even relationships would make no difference, and Ruber in his way made the same judgments about the writer. Sidney, as you know, was not a happy man. He could have been a far better artist still, for if his vision was intense, my dear friend, it was cramped, and it moved within itself in an agony to find a creative release that could never be found in a creative product alone, but in the psyche from which that product emerges. You are aware of the nonsense connected with artists and poets and so forth, that they are too sensitive for the world, that great talent brings spiritual desolation, and that a man's genius more often destroys him than fulfills him. Add to that list the belief that the great artist or writer concentrates upon his or her art so intensely and single-mindedly and single-heartedly that the focus itself forces the artist or poet to use those abilities to their utmost, or that great genius demands one-sided vision and a denial of the world. An artist or writer believing such selective nonsense will of course find all of his or her other creative abilities a distraction, a bother, a temptation that is bound to detract from the main genius, rather than add to it, deepen its application, and add an orchestration to its subjective moods that would otherwise be quite lacking. Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, for example, would have gone out of their minds acting as it seems people sometimes believe that an artist should act. Their stories have been greatly romanticized to fit the picture, if you will forgive the pun. They often worked by choice with a multitude of workmen, apprentices, students, hangers-on, and whatever, for all of Michelangelo's painting. He found great zest in the political tumult of his time, in which he was, of course, quite intimately involved. He played church and state against each other, made an ass of the Pope whenever he could, and was deeply involved in the social, political, and religious fervor of those days. That applies even more, of course, to Da Vinci, who was a social dilettante besides, but a man of incredible vision, a psychic if you prefer, who invented in his mind gadgets that would not physically come into your world for centuries. Those sketches of his, it seems, do not stand up as creative products as a great sculpture might, but they stand for a truly creative originality in which a consciousness played with internal material and projected outward many of the material properties that then simply did not exist. Much of his art in those terms did not show, but the art of his consciousness expanded beyond Michelangelo's. None of your abilities contradict each other, or oppose each other, or minimize each other, or in any way negate any of your probable accomplishments. They are meant to be creatively stocked, not just to be combined, for example, in conventional terms, but the abilities naturally or psychically merged. They mean that your own consciousness, as you think of it, has a slant, a potential, a rich combination, a peculiar severed blend that is meant to be its own creative rule. The creative products are important. They are physical landmarks of psychic and artistic inner journeys. But what you do with your consciousness, how you extend it, is even more important. For as physical play is meant to lead to a future physical body that is mature and fulfilled, so the creative nature of that kind of inner play leads to future extended consciousness, an inner being that is the mature version of an earlier self. You get what you concentrate upon. Are you tired? Ralph said, no. They said, the inner creative man knows, as the child did, that the way will be cleared. They are Miss Bowman. There was art school and so forth, so I want you to remember that inner man. Social beliefs from childhood or whatever are overlays. They are superficial. They are unfortunate effects only when you do not tread the inner self. When you do, your behavior is actually self-correcting. And if you understand that, you will see that some behavior that appears contradictory is instead quite simply creative, corrective activity. When you do not understand that, then you can become bewildered, thinking, why did such and such work last week and not this week? Sometimes the advice I give you at any given time is meant to take the place of natural creative corrective behavior that ideally you would have taken on your own, but did not. As long as you feel, for example, that there is a conflict between your writing and your painting, then you must somehow or other give each an equal enough play, or you become upset. After your bout, Rod noted, of illness, they said, I therefore suggested you go back to painting, which is important to you, and it is quite true that when you do not paint for a while, you feel uneasy. and psychically out of balance. The feeling of competition between the two abilities operates in the other fashion, of course, so that if you have not been writing, you feel the same unease. You cannot separate the elements of a psyche, approving of some abilities and not others, putting some in competition with others, without experiencing difficulties. The very nature of your painting is, and must be, determined by the quality of your mind, which is inquiring, which refuses to be cramped, which piles questions upon questions, while you think that the artist should ideally ask no question at all. If you would try to see your own creative unity, then both your painting and your writing will give greater satisfaction and become richer. Your prose inspired by your imaginary, and your painting by your ideas, so that both are sparked, producing not only products but a creative vision that sees reality through an extension that would be the natural art of consciousness, meant to blossom from those abilities. Think yourself as a creative consciousness, capable of both a detailed and an extended, both a visual and a thoughtful word focus. When you are writing, your mind is also playing with images. When you are painting, your mind is also building ideas. Forget the old idea of exclusive expression. Now, Ruber's list is an excellent idea, and so is the note on the refrigerator. Remind him to walk at least twice daily, and to add to that when possible. Have him forget his ideas of the exclusive expression of creativity, mental or physical. His body is responding, and very well. Encourage his reception of relaxation. He is also being creative when he is relaxed. This session should be of excellent use, really, to both of you. And remembering the playful nature of creativity will help Ruber get back to his book. He does that by forgetting the book and playing with the ideas that it contains. You were right, then, when you worked on the book before your bout. And during that time, you trusted yourself. But then your ideas of the comparative nature of your ideas intruded, triggered at that time by Crowder's death, and the ensuing beliefs about the male role in society, and as that applied to your own talents. Let alone, ideally, you might have taken a week of joyful painting, during which time your mind refreshed itself, and new ideas about your notes accumulated, telling you, or rather suggesting, that your paint simply put you on that course. Do you follow me? Ross said yes. She said, but the conflict can dissolve in a synthesis of understanding, in which case the problems do indeed vanish. End of session. You are free then to do as you prefer. If you realize that, I bid you a fond and hearty good evening. Ross said, thank you very much, said